Hello and welcome to Board Game Bonkers. This is Under the Meeple Light Show. I'm Jay Sears, and today's guest is Pete McPherson, who's the designer of Tiny Towns. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a freelance board game designer. Design Tiny Towns, as you mentioned, with AEG, and also Wormholes with AEG. Most recently, Fit to Print with Flat Out Games, and they did a partnership, as they often do, with AEG. So I'm always working on fresh designs. I do a little bit of freelance writing. I've written a couple of rule books as well, actually. So just trying to make my way as a board game designer and having a ton of fun along the way.
Yeah, and Tiny Towns has done well, isn't it? Was it ranked in the top 500 board game geek, which is not mean feat at all, is it? It's quite tough to get up there.
Yeah, thank you.
And you've done well with that. So I'll just explain to our viewers what this is all about in case you've clicked on this. You're not familiar with it under Maple Light. So we'll be presenting 9 questions in season two to our guests, which have come from this bowl. They're random. They have no idea what the questions are. And instead of our final 10th question, we'll be drawing one of these scenarios that are remaining, which our guest, of course, has no idea what the scenarios are. So well, I guess 5 on the Maple Lights are, well, people a little bit nervous. We're about to find out as we present 9 questions and the scenario to a guest. So, Pete, are we ready?
I'm ready. Hit me.
Fantastic. So let's draw out our first question and let's see what comes out. So only a few left, and we'll see if we get some interesting ones remaining. So question number 1 is the board game industry underrepresentative of disadvantaged groups?
Ooh, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, there's a few ways underrepresented groups could be more included in the board game industry, both from the perspective of the designers and publishers and developers, editors, and so on who make these games, and the folks who are represented within the games themselves. So I think some people are working hard to make it a more welcoming place, make it a place more representative of the fans of board games because it's an incredibly diverse, group of people who call themselves board gamers. So, yeah, I think at all levels, more representation is needed. There's a pretty depressing statistic, I don't remember the exact numbers on, talking about how few games feature a woman on the cover of the game. I think there are more animals and aliens on board game covers when you look at the top 1,000 or so on Board Game Geek than women. So that's a pretty low bar. I think there's a long ways to go, which in some respects is exciting. We have a lot to look forward to, but there's much work to be done for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultures not represented in games either, is there? And usually you see there's quite an imbalance between males and females when it comes to the representation, of these, especially with these kind of fantasy games, it's mostly males and there's very few females in them. And particular ethnic minority groups as well, that seem to be a lack of representation in games and or an unbalance between, perhaps those who are white Caucasian versus those who come from different cultures.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, I think it's not surprising, but it's also perplexing. I mean, from a business standpoint, you're making your games if you're a publisher or a designer to reach as many people as possible. And so to exclude groups of people is potentially alienating, excluding your potential audience because most board gamers are not white men, despite what some people believe. It's a hugely diverse group of people. So the more inclusive you can be with your designs, both from the people who you include in your projects and the people who you represent in your games, the better chance you have of speaking to someone and connecting with someone and making them excited to see themselves represented in your games.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone deliberately goes out the way to exclude people from the games. I think it just naturally comes from experiences and your understanding of the world out there as well. But yeah, hopefully we can see that change in the future and more diversity come into board gaming. So let's move
Absolutely.
to our second question. And let's see what comes out. It's quite a thought-provoking question, that first one.
That was a good one, yeah.
So In your opinion, what's the biggest threat to the board game industry?
The biggest threat. Hmm. The biggest threat to the board game industry. I think right now the game industry is at a little bit of a crossroads when it comes to working within a changing climate and making games out of this renewable but limited resource paper, and then of course plastic as well. Plastic's a part of almost every game. Even games without plastic components have plastic baggies, plastic trays, UV spot finishes in the box, which is actually a plastic layer. So people are really excited, understandably so, by games that have plastic miniatures or really nice, unique components. But these things are expensive and they're going to get more expensive. So I think if the industry isn't able to find a way to pivot toward a more renewable format, it's going to be in a bit of trouble just from a cost basis, but also as people become more aware, as people care more about where their games come from and what resources are used to produce them, it's going to become a bigger issue. So I think especially over the next decade or so, that's going to become a really important topic in the industry.
Yeah, I know Czech games recently have introduced a more renewable source of making, not wood, it's almost like chip kind of pieces or the kind of dust that you like, just made, and it's almost like wood. And they're trying to look at more innovative ways to make it more renewable and safer for the environment. And I think that's the way things will go, because as we know, plastic is not good for the environment. It's obviously dangerous for animals. We know that. So it's about looking at obviously innovative ways, and hopefully publishers will start moving them that way. You know, Czech games are one of the first that are doing that. So hopefully we can see more and more of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So fingers crossed, we'll see what the future brings. And we'll move on to our third question, Pete. We'll see what comes out. So we've had a couple of tough ones, actually.
No kidding. Yeah.
Like we'll get a nice one. So question three is, what's one recent board game experience that has exceeded your expectations?
Let's see. Recent board game experience. Um, so I recently got the new edition of Acquire, designed by Sid Saxon, that Renegade Games put out. And this is a game I grew up playing with my dad and my brother. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a pretty dry looking box. We had the version from like early 70s, and it's a game about hotel companies. There's a big grid of letters with coordinates like A2 and H3, and you place tiles, and if they form groups, it creates a hotel chain, which you can then buy stock in. You're trying to get your chains to get merged by bigger ones, so you get a big payout, and you want to have a lot of stock in the big companies remaining at the end of the game. So it's dry as dust, the theme, but it's pretty exciting gameplay wise. So I got this new edition, which is very nice looking compared to the old one, and brought it to game night last week with some friends and asked if they wanted to try it. I gave them the primer and told them, it's a mathy game about stocks and whatnot, and it looks super boring, but I promise it's really an exciting time. And they got super into it. It was awesome. We played in an hour and a half, which is faster than I expected, and I didn't think they were gonna get into it quite as much as they did. We had a really awesome time. It was 6 players, which is a very chaotic player count for that game, but it was a really good experience. Great time.
It's great, isn't it, when you find games that exceed your expectations and you expect it to be about, well, it won't be that great. And then you play it and it turns out to be one of the best games you've played recently.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it's a fun game, but I wasn't sure my friends were going to be into it. Whenever I bring out a heavier, thinkier game like that, I try to really prepare people. I don't want anyone to get into a game they're not gonna, they're not gonna be up for an hour and a half, potentially 2 hour experience. I want them to know, hey, this is what you're getting into. I don't want you to feel roped into anything. So, um, I find setting expectations helpful for games like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be interesting to find out from our viewers actually if they've had a similar experience with perhaps they played somebody's introduced into a game, they thought, oh, this is not for me, and played it, thought, actually, I love this game. So let us know in the comments down below if that's happened to you, because I'd love to check out those games and see what you've got in store. So let's move on to our next question, number four, Pete.
Hmm.
That was quite a nice question. So number 4 is, if you had an unlimited budget, what innovation would you want to create in our board game industry?
Innovation, something totally new. Ooh, that is a tricky one. I don't know if I would go the way of something electronic or app driven, but I think there's a lot of cool things to be done in that space. Hmm. Boy, yeah, I gotta think about that one. That is tough. I don't tend to design games that are super component driven. They don't really revolve around a component. Um,
Do you think we'd see more augmented reality or AI come into the board game industry?
Possibly. I don't know if it's. I think it definitely will have a bigger role, especially as it becomes easier to work with. But I don't know if it would ever become a fixture. I think people like the analogness of games. Sorry, I'm just trying to work up a really good answer here. I know I have one. It's just out of reach. Um, hmm, hmm.
I think many would struggle with this question. It's not easy to come up with an innovative answer on the spot.
Yes, I'm trying to invent something on the spot, and I don't have a great answer for you. Um, boy, can I circle back to that one?
We certainly will. We'll move on.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like game design, nothing just comes out of the blue. We need time to think and experience different things. So perhaps
Right.
another on a bit later. So let's move on to question number 5.
Wait, actually, I have my answer.
Bring it on. Let's hear it.
Okay. If we could create glasses that players can wear that allow some people to see some parts of the board and other players to see others, I think that could be really helpful to have hidden information where players are easily just able to see stuff that is private to them while not seeing information that other players have access to in a board with a lot of moving parts. I think that would open up a whole ton of design opportunities. So there we go. Glasses that let you very easily distinguish between your private components and others with everything face up on the table.
That's such a really good idea, and I could see that working extremely well in quite a number of games, especially hidden roles, hidden movement, horror types of games. So that could work extremely well. So I'm sure a publisher will, if they're actually watching this, on. So let's move on to question number 5. So from your board game collection, which game would your family members avoid to play that you want to play?
It would be a feast for Odin, I would say. Fortunately, I have some friends who are up for this 4-hour Viking Tetris game by Uwe Rosenberg. It's one of my favorites. I love just really getting into this immersive, thinky, puzzly experience. But it's way longer than my family prefers. My wife and I play a lot of heavier games. She loves heavy, crunchy games, but she doesn't like long games. So it's just beyond how long she would like to sit at a table playing board games, which I totally understand. So unfortunately, not a game I ever get to play with my family, but I've got a great group of friends that are up for it, and we make like a day-long event of it every once in a while, and I cook a bunch of food for everyone. So that's okay. But yes, Feast for Odin, not quite for my family, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, and you do need to find the right group, don't you, to play those longer games? 'Cause nobody wants to sit and play a 4-hour game, do they?
Yes, that's another one where I really set expectations with people. I don't want anyone coming to board game day unaware of what's involved with that behemoth of a game.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a gaming session on Friday, and we're emming and ahhing because we've got the kids around us, thinking we can't play a heavy game or a game that you're going to lose your train of thought because
Hmm.
you interrupted. So we thought, well, do you know, at the end of this pandemic, let's play Pandemic. Let's play that. Now it's a safe time to play it. If you get interrupted, it doesn't matter because you're not thinking too many steps ahead. And
Right.
you know, so if I forget, you'll remember.
Yep.
Absolutely right. It's
Good
got to
point.
be good for the right people and the evening ahead. So let's move on to question number 6. So 6 is, what do you admire the most about the board game industry?
I would say what I admire most is the general friendliness of the people in the industry. This isn't always the case, of course. There are bad actors out there, but between publishers, most small publishers, really most big publishers even, are friends with each other. It's really nice to see that banter and friendship at conventions. And among designers, maybe it's because there's just not that money to be made in the board game industry, but designers are rarely competing with each other. So um, I'm super happy for my friends when they're getting games signed. There's no envy or jealousy. It's for the most part a very positive industry where people are just all working together to push each other forward. Like collaboration really helps everyone out ultimately. So again, maybe it's in part because there's not that much money to be had, but um, it it can be a very welcoming industry at times at all levels, which is quite nice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a friendly, opening community, isn't it, the board game industry? And you're right. It doesn't feel fiercely competitive. Yes, there's competition. Of course, there is. You have to run a business, but it is still that openness and friendliness. Everyone wants others to do well because if they don't, eventually things will all collapse if they don't start thriving and improving the industry. So you're absolutely right. It is a great community to be part of. So we will move on to our next question. We're on question number 7, Kate. So we're doing well. We nearly finished the ball. So question 7 is, which rule do you dislike the most in board games?
Which rule? Ooh, that's a good one. There's a lot of rules other people dislike that I actually enjoy, but um, which rule? I'm not sure if this is a rule so much as a mechanism, but I'll say it anyway. When there's an element in games that lets someone take away a thing I have worked to build, I that really rubs me the wrong way. Not necessarily take that, but just destroying a thing that I took the time to make. Like I believe Seven Wonders Duel has an element through the military route where you can take away your opponent's cards. And for me, that is a really feel bad moment. I like when other players can like muck up my engine or make me discard cards in a deck building game because that's not truly taking away my progress. It's just hindering my future progress. But taking away a thing I've done in the past is really feel bad for me, especially when it comes from another player's choices. So that is personally one of my least favorite forms of player interaction.
There was actually, interestingly, a talk, and I think, was it Rob, the designer of Pandemic? I think he talked looking at how he created Legacy Pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Rob
And
Davio.
yeah, and he was talking about those kind of those feelings. If you create that feeling that somebody has been disadvantaged or somebody's been taken away from them, it gives a really negative input and it leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Now, I didn't say those words, but that's what he was referring to. And it's really interesting because the psychology behind it shows that, a lot of players love achieving something and they love receiving something. It makes them feel good. If someone takes something away from you, it makes you feel absolutely rubbish. That's
Yeah. Yeah, I think psychologically there's a huge difference between being blocked from something you were going to get in the future. Someone took the action space you wanted in a worker placement game. It can be a huge bummer. It can muck up your plans, but something hasn't been taken from you yet. You've just been blocked from a thing you were going to get in the future. You've been slowed down. But having a thing that was yours, that you had ownership over, that you maybe spent a few turns to create, taken away, it sets you back. All those turns are now, they were wasted. That thing is no more. That feels so bad to me. That's so painful. So yeah, big difference between those two things.
yeah. You don't want to be playing a game with my daughter then, who loves destroying what you've got. Let's move on to our next question. So we're on question number 8. So question 8 is, which video game or movie would you like to see made into a board game?
Ooh, video game or movie? Okay, so this is a slightly obscure one, I guess, but the movie Mortal Engines, which was a Peter Jackson production, is based on one of my favorite book series I read growing up by Philip Reeve, The Mortal Engines Quartet. The movie was all right. I think it was better than many people believed. As an adaptation, I thought they did a pretty serviceable job in capturing the feeling of those books. Wasn't the most popular movie, but the mechanisms of that world are so interesting and I think could definitely be represented in a board game. Essentially, it's a future where somehow cities have become these massive mobile machines and they drive around Europe and eat each other. It's a bit silly for sure. But it creates this very interesting world and ecosystem where machines are salvaging parts of other cities or taking them in and growing stronger and bigger. And I've actually been tinkering a little bit with some design ideas for how I might make a game set in that world. So I'd have to reach out to the author Philip Reeve and then probably Warner Brothers, who owns the rights to the movie. But I think it could be a pretty compelling design, possibly using elements of electronic football, if you're familiar with that one, American football. The big vibrating metal board and the players move around and when a tackle happens, you pause the game and find out the ramifications. I think something similar to that. Sorry, Teams just had a pop up window for me for some reason. I think something similar to electronic football like that could work for the world of Mortal Engines. So that's one I would personally like to design and that I wish already existed.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. There's quite a lot of IP games out there now, isn't there? But there's usually the big blockbuster films that we know about. It doesn't tend to be the smaller films that might actually turn into a great ball game.
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed by some of the video game adaptations in particular. I mean, video games tend to be oriented around fighting, and I don't love board games about fighting myself. So it's probably just not my genre. But like the Horizon Zero Dawn board game, for instance, it's a great video game, but I don't really want to sit down and have miniatures attacking each other. But hey, that's a whole genre of board games that many people love, so it's just not the product for me. So yeah, maybe someday I'll have a chance to work on an IP I'm really excited about in a board game.
Yeah, we will see. So let's try a final question. Let's see if you love this one. Let's see if it's a nice one. So question nine, our final question is, would you rather play three smaller games or one big game in a night?
Oh, I love this question. So I sort of like small games and big games equally. But I would say generally speaking, I'd rather play three small games. I always say that if there's a game that takes three times as long as three smaller games, it needs to be more than three times as fun because there's a lot more effort that goes into that one long experience. There needs to be a lot of bang for your buck. I adore puzzle game or party games or smaller puzzle games that play really quickly. I love a good snappy game. We just played Deep Sea Adventure from Oink the other night. I love a lot of what Oink Games puts out. But I also enjoy a longer, thinkier one like Agricola or A Feast for Odin or Taverns of Tiefenthal. It's really nice to sink your brain into a big experience like that. For me, those are long games that they're worth the effort, they're worth the setup, the processing power it takes, just how long they take, how much table space they cover. It's all worth it, but a lot of longer games aren't for me. So it needs to be worth the squeeze. So I would almost always choose the three smaller games, but there's those big event board games that I do love from time to time to get to the table.
Yeah, it's an interesting answer. And I suppose it depends on the group as well, doesn't it? I know when I've got some friends round, we'll play the kind of more deeper thinking games. We'll play one game, it's 2, 3 hours, and that's tend to where we go. Whereas with other groups, it'll be smaller, kind of might be some lighter games. It really depends on the group.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to present you now with a scenario. We've got two scenarios here. Okay. So you can choose either one. I'll let you choose which of these scenarios you want.
Okay, I'm ready.
So do you want to choose number one or number two?
Oh, that's all I get. Okay, I'll choose number one.
Okay. You don't know what it is. You have no idea. Okay, so your scenario is, it's quite an interesting one. So you wake up one night and see an alien standing at the end of your bed. Which game do you introduce them to and why?
Oh, that's interesting. And I like how you made me choose between one and two. You've been drawing questions randomly from a bowl this whole time, and now you've put it on me. It's still random, but you made me choose. So I'm responsible for having to answer this scenario. Which game do I choose to play with the alien and why? That's my first response to seeing an alien at the foot of my bed is I've got to play a board game with them. Which one do I choose? That is funny. Um, well, let's see. I would want to get to know this individual. This is a really a big experience for humanity. I've potentially made first contact with an alien life form that presumably is intelligent. How would I want to get to know them? Um, boy. Okay. Assuming they can speak and read English, be very helpful. I think that wavelength would be a really good one to play with them. There's a two-player co-op version of Wavelength I really enjoy and play with my wife from time to time. It would reveal a lot about what they already know about human culture. I could teach them some things about human culture as well. I could find out where the two of us fall, where we really differ on some topics, and where the similarities are. And I think it would be funny, it'd be informative. Um, yeah, I think Wavelength would be the best first contact scenario game to play with an intelligent English speaking life form.
Choice that, yes, I think that would be a really interesting evening, wouldn't it? Playing that game with the alien, who no doubt both I suspect to do extremely well in that game. So
Yeah, and then I'd wake up in the morning and wonder if the whole thing was a dream, of course.
well, that brings us to the end of the show and end to the season. So I'd like to thank our guest Pete for joining us. And if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel. And we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. So if there are any particular questions you'd like us to do in the future, well, I've got some good things coming up for season three. We're going to have a break. We'll come back next year with season three. And we're going to spice things up and do things a little bit different than we have for the first two seasons. But I'd love to hear from you. So please leave a comment down below and get in touch if there's anything you'd like to see us do in the future. But please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And thanks again for watching. My name's Jay Sears, and you've been watching Under the Maple Lights with Board Game Bonkers.